With around 40-something days to go before the election, polls have been starting to tighten up in a lot of battleground states. For example, Florida is a very important swing state. An NBC News Marist poll released last week showed Donald Trump leading among Latinos in Florida, around 50 to 46, which, of course, again, you have a pretty tight race going on in Florida, of which they're basically pulling neck and neck. Another survey of Miami-Dade County voters shared around the same time by Ben Dixon and Amandi International and the Miami Herald, and no, I don't mean Ben Dixon as in Benjamin Dixon. They also gave Donald Trump a slight lead over Biden when it came to Hispanic voters. Now, this, of course, has establishment Democrats in a panic. And so here comes one MSNBC analyst who has who's figured out the person to blame.
If I was Joe Biden and I wanted to win the state of Florida, I would not be taking Bernie Sanders' advice. Bernie Sanders is the reason why the socialist label has stuck for some voters on Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders is the reason why a lot of South Florida Hispanics in particular are afraid that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left, why they're susceptible to this messaging from the Trump campaign that they should fear the Democratic Party. That's why Joe Biden has to reintroduce himself and tell these voters, I am a deal maker. I spent decades in the Senate trying to bring Republicans and Democrats together. I was the guy Barack Obama would send to negotiate with Mitch McConnell. I want to bring this country together. I am not a radical, and nothing in my record indicates that. That's the message that a lot of these Latino voters, people who understandably are concerned with all this talk about socialism, because they left their countries fleeing those ideas and fleeing those kinds of revolutions. So they need to hear from Joe Biden. They need to know who he is. And when it comes to South Florida Hispanics, at least, if I was Joe Biden, I would not be taking Senator Sanders' advice.
Well, I mean, good news for you, he's never taken Bernie Sanders' advice. He's not moved left on really any issue. And he's actually one of the most conservative Democrats. He was certainly the most conservative Democrat in the primary. And so now he's an incredibly conservative Democratic nominee. And so, I mean, I guess you don't have anything to worry about. But wow, look at that. Big shocker. Now Biden is not doing as well in the polls. And of course, I believe that it's because he's not courting progressives, is because he's not being strong enough in this message. But he's not doing well with Latino voters in Florida. And suddenly, well, that's Bernie Sanders' fault because he's quote unquote socialist. And I love the advice too. He's got to prove that he's got to show that he's not a radical. You know what that means? Moving further to the right, being more conservative, of course. Now, here's again the irony, right? Bernie Sanders has been campaigning his ass off for Joe Biden. I really don't think Bernie Sanders is happy to do that. But he made a promise. He said, I'm going to work hard to defeat Donald Trump. And he said in numerous interviews, I don't agree with Joe Biden on his policy. Joe Biden doesn't agree with me on his policy. But I am going to work my ass off to defeat Donald Trump. And Bernie Sanders is a man of his word. And so, you know, look, that for that reason alone, he's got respect from me. And of course, for many other reasons as well, because I agree with Bernie Sanders on his issues. And so it's insane for this MSNBC guy to come out and say, well, it's all Bernie's fault if you lose, if Joe Biden loses Florida. It doesn't have anything to do with what we were doing. Oh, no. But like, here's the thing, right, about Hispanics in Florida. There are a lot of Cubans in Florida, right? And look, generally these people tend to be more conservative. They generally tend to vote for Republicans in fairly large numbers, right? So my question is, why are you going to focus on that community that's never going to vote for you in the first place? There are people who are progressives in Florida that Biden could appeal to. Because, again, you're not going to win the conservatives in Cuba. In Florida. The Cubans in Florida. But, again, you could win over with progressives. You could. if you try. I mean, look, Latinos are not they're obviously not a monolith, right? Just like black voters, they're not a monolith. Turns out younger Hispanic voters went for Bernie Sanders massively, overwhelmingly in the primary over Joe Biden, right? Now, he also had a huge lead with Latinos in Texas and California. Why? It's because he worked for it. A lot of young Latino supporters, told The Guardian that they were drawn to Bernie Sanders because of his policies, his promise to do Medicare for all and to do free college tuition. It turns out those are really important policies to that community as well. Because of course it's an important, these are important policies. And understand, like, there's just, I guess it's this trope, right? And it seems a little bit racist, that old Latinos care about is immigration. Immigration is an important issue, right? Especially for these communities. But at the same time, they also care about minimum wage, right? Living wage. They care about, healthcare, as the majority of the country does, right? And they also care about college tuition, because right now student loan debt is crushing young people, but especially crushing communities of color. I mean, African Americans are a great example of that. They actually have much more student loan debt because they're trying extremely hard to get out of some of those terrible conditions in some of the inner city communities, right? And so they take out more debt, and they often actually get paid less than their white counterparts because of systemic racism. And so student loan reform, very, very important. Getting rid of student loan debt, wiping it out completely, canceling the debt, and making college free for every single person. So that's what Bernie Sanders was in favor of. That is not what Joe Biden is in favor of. So he said he would not do that stuff. So yes, he's lost progressives, and he never had these conservative Florida, Cubans that live in Florida. And so, but here's the thing. Again, going back to the point where he's like, they think he's socialist. Socialism scares them, right? The right wing will always use socialism as a smear, right? They will say, oh, look at the Democrats with their scary socialism, right? I remember being told, well, we can't vote for Bernie Sanders. We can't have Bernie Sanders as our nominee because they're going to call him a socialist and a communist. And they're going to say, oh, look at him. He'll never win Florida because Fidel Castro, right? And communism and all that stuff. Well, look at Joe Biden. He's not doing very well in Florida, tied with Trump, losing Latinos to Trump, and also being called a scary socialist. It's almost as if we were right. Like when we pointed out that ridiculous point. But it's funny because I wish Biden were half as socialist as the right wing paints him as. Maybe we'd actually have at least a public option, right? And because here's the thing, the Biden campaign, you could say, well, wait a minute, they're in favor of a public option, right? They're backing off from that. And they're also backing off from more taxes on the rich. So, but here's the thing about this guy. I think this is an attempt to lay the groundwork in case Joe Biden loses Florida and possibly loses the election. Again, Florida's an important swing state for the Electoral College. Biden needs to win it. Biden also needs to win states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. As again, you need the Electoral College. And so, look, this guy is apparently laying the groundwork for Bernie Sanders being quote unquote too left. And I guess Joe Biden not being conservative enough, too involved in the campaign, being, Bernie Sanders, and is making the argument that Biden should go right wing and disavow the person who is campaigning his ass off for him, yet not sharing his agenda at all. I mean, this is what MSNBC has become. I can't stand it anymore. I despise MSNBC. This is nothing more than establishment Democrat propaganda. There's only a couple of hosts out there. They're halfway decent. You've got Chris Hayes and Ari Melber, right? Who's a little bit more lefty than he tries to present himself, but it slips out now and then. And look, but the network itself is wholly against progressives like Bernie Sanders. And look, if Biden loses, again, they've got their excuses lined up. And a lot of it involves Bernie Sanders, as well as the left, as well as people on Twitter, as well as the Russians. And, you know, if only all that didn't exist, then maybe we would actually win. And if the Democrats were more like Republicans, well, then they could actually win. So that means the Democrats need to be going further to the right. That's what we see on MSNBC. That's what we see. And it's absolutely disgusting. It is a garbage network. It is trash.